I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work and are backed by science. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body. And that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. We use only top-of-the-line formulations dosed for maximum results and the best flavoring systems available. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Tighten up.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Brian Dobson, owner of Metroflex Gym, the original home of hardcore training. This pandemic has nearly crippled the fitness industry we all so dearly love. With Metroflex gyms now opening up all across the country, it's our turn to hit back. If your health was ever a priority, now's the time. Now's the time to stop feeding your fear and your anxieties and feed your desire to get back on the saddle. For desire is the starting point of all achievement. For those who feel uncertain for what the future will hold, I'm here to assure you Metroflex Gym will continue to provide a platform for bodybuilding and strength conditioning athletes all across the nation. This optimism extends to potential owners looking to venture into owning and operating a Metroflex gym. With interest rates at an all-time low, you can open up your own Metroflex gym for the price of a new car. Our Metroflex gyms are back in business. We're now waiting for you to do the same. Stay hardcore, y'all. God bless.
All right, and here we are for another episode of Live with Dave Palumbo. I'm going to be your host, Anthony Pasquale. We're going to be doing another round of questions for the guru himself and see what we can learn about him today. How you doing over there?
I love the fact that I don't have to introduce the show, because I always hate introducing because I never know what to say that's original, and so you've taken on that burden. And I think you're the only person I actually would trust with maybe Romano and Aceto too, but there's very few people I would trust with interviewing me, on my own show, for that matter,
Yeah. No, I appreciate. I know the only other people I think you'd let do it would be like Howard Stern and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, maybe Howard said, maybe Joe Rogan. I don't know, but we'll.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, just so you know, for people that haven't seen this before, we did one of these like a month ago, and I think we had a great response with it. So we're going to do it again today, and hopefully everyone enjoys the questions. So, Dave, you ready to get started?
Let's do it, man.
Okay, one of the questions I've always kind of wondered about is, and I initially thought of this because of creatine. People forget the creatine wasn't around in 1994. I remember when I turned 16 years old, that's what I wanted for my birthday. It was brand new. So my question for you is, back in the day, other than the metric shakes, and I think you were using Metrics because you were sponsored by them.
Right.
One, how many metric shakes a day were you taking, and what other supplements were you taking in the 90s? Like, what were you actually taking as far as regular supplements?
Right. Bill Phillips was really the first one to really market that creatine product, and it was called Phosphagen. And I didn't really buy it from him. It was really expensive, and I was really of the belief that protein was more important. So I was buying the original Metrex, and Metrex at the time came in 2 tubs. It was a base and a plus. The base was like the vitamin mineral mix, and the flavoring, and then the plus was like this. It was just the protein in there, and there was like a very light flavor to it. It almost had no taste to it. So, and for some reason, you had to mix 2 scoops of each together, and it was like you were doing a science experiment. It was so exciting, but it was like $3.50 a serving, like for 2 scoops of each, and you only had like 12 or 14 servings in both of those tubs. And the funny thing is, why they figured it out this way. If you bought the, they came together. Obviously, you couldn't buy them separate initially, but you always ran out of the base before you ran out of the plus. So you got more. I don't know why it didn't work together, like the 2 scoops and you're done. So you always had extra, which was good because the plus was the extra protein. So I would use a little extra protein in every shake, which was kind of cool. So I spent a lot of money on that because I was buying at retail. And as a matter of fact, I continued to buy at retail even after I started working for another company at the time because I just loved the shake and I felt like I got really good results with it. Remember, it was hard to get enough protein back then. And if, really the only options were like Joe Weider's, like, Mega Masses and Dynamic Muscle Builders. And they tasted good, but they were basically powdered skim milk. So you got, if you had any lactose sensitivity, it would just, destroy your stomach. Now, back then I could digest lactose a little better than I can now, but it was tough. So I really think the first creatine I bought was more of like a pure, and I'm trying to think what brand I bought. It was like a generic creatine, like where it was just creatine monohydrate. There was nothing added to it. I don't know if Bill Phillips sold it or someone else sold it. I'm actually drawing a blank, but I bought it just like it was. I think it used to come like 100 milligrams at first, which is nothing, But you do and they made you load dose it back then. They said you got to load it up 20 grams a day. So 100 grams, you go through it in a week, less than a week. And I thought I think it was a marketing scheme. I found that 10 grams a day worked well for me back then when I was really big. So I would take like 5 in the morning, I would take 5 after I trained, and I felt like I was growing from the stuff. But, that was, really the only performance supplement that was on the market back then. The shakes were just starting to take off, and I never was a stimulant guy. Bill Phillips used to market another company, AST Research, Paul DeLeo owned it. He had a company that produced a product called Dimetadrine, which was basically ephedra, in these little pills. And a lot of guys were using that, before training. And I never needed stimulants. When I would diet, I would drink a little bit of coffee, but I wasn't into it. I felt like it was going to be too catabolic for my body. I was really neurotic about cortisol levels. So much so that, and I've mentioned this before, that I would sleep till noon every day to try to avoid the cortisol rise that occurs in the morning when you get up. So this is how neurotic I was about cortisol. If I was driving, and how you get like a close call where someone always hits you or something like that, or you swerve at the last minute and you feel that adrenaline rush. I would actually feel like I was losing muscle when that happened. I would go crazy. I would be like, fuck, I just lost muscle. That's how crazy I was. So I mean, that's really where it was at, and I tried all the supplements that they were making at the time, but the only tried and true ones I think that really worked was creatine and like I said, the protein powders of the day. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, you know what else was another big one that Bill Phillips got everyone hooked on was vanadyl sulfate. So before I had ever tried insulin, I noticed that because I was taking in so much food, I didn't feel like I was absorbing it. And when vanadyl sulfate came out, it was marketed as an insulin mimicker. It wasn't like it didn't make your insulin work better. It actually acted like insulin. And if anyone who took it, if you took vanadyl and didn't eat, your blood sugar went in the toilet. You would start shaking and everything like that. So it definitely had an insulin-like effect, and supposedly it only drove nutrients into the muscle cells. It didn't store anything as fat. So it was actually better than insulin. So I was using that for a while, and I noticed some definite gains on that. I don't know why it disappeared from the market. Someone tried to bring back a chelated version of vanadyl, because the sulfate version is the salt form of it. Recently, a friend of mine who I was trying to help him market a little bit, it was a chelated form of vanadyl, vanadium, and I don't know why it didn't catch on. I guess people would rather take insulin nowadays. But those were my supplements: vanadyl sulfate and creatine. Matter of fact, I would take them together a lot of times because, you know, creatine needs insulin to get into the muscle cells. So rather than taking a ridiculous amount of sugar, which is what a lot of like companies were selling, Muscle Tech with the Cell Tech and Phil Phillips with the Phosphagen, I just would mix the creatine in my protein shake and take a vanadyl sulfate with it.
Yeah, that was my question, because I did have good success with the Cell Tech, but once again, there was the massive loading phases and all the sugar, so maybe it was a little bit of everything that was helping me with that.
The sugar the reason I didn't do all the sugar, not that I was so against sugar, even though I am kind of like, I know it's not good for you, it was that it would fill me up too much and I couldn't eat my food. I couldn't eat enough protein. You drink 100 grams of sugar, you know, with 5 grams of creatine, you don't want to eat anything. You feel sick to your stomach. I mean, it tastes good going down, but then you just feel full. So I felt like it was just empty, wasted calories I was using, you know.
Yeah, original versions, later on it tasted better, but the originals were acidic. It was like lemon lime and orange. They weren't like blue raspberry back then. They tasted like shit.
Yeah, but think about it. How much insulin could you possibly need to absorb creatine? You don't need 100 grams of glucose to absorb 5 grams of creatine. They probably could have put, you know, 15 grams of glucose in there, and you probably would have been enough, you know.
Yeah, no, valid point.
You know, I used to mix it, believe it or not, with grape juice. I would buy pure grape juice that had no like sugar added to it, and grape juice is unlike other juice. Other juices are fructose driven. Grapes are actually glucose, so I would put pure grape juice, like in maybe like four ounces. I put my scoop of creatine in there. It's coming back to me now, and I would gulp that down, and that was my phosphagen. You know, a lot cheaper.
Interesting. All right, that's good to know. I learned a lot on that one. Here's a question for you. Speaking of blood sugar and things like that, I remember back when you trained, when we were doing my diets for a lot of competitions, and it's interesting. You were talking the other day, and you were talking about how a lot of people, you may start them on a template, but you'd a lot of times start me with carbs, and then we would start with a 3 on with carbs, 1 day without, and then eventually be a 2 and 1 or a 1 and 1. It would flip a lot. So my question to you is, I remember you would talk about this. You were training either Juan Morel at the time or maybe even Mike Liberatore. You were doing their diets. Do you think different people hit ketosis with different macronutrient profiles? Like, do you think there's people that have 60 grams of carbs a day and still can be in ketosis?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, actually. I think elite bodybuilders can do it because I think I did it. I was eating probably my usual ketogenic diet getting ready for a show, and I only really did it the last 6 weeks because the last couple of years of my career, I only dieted for 6 weeks. I didn't need any more than that. So I would do probably 50, maybe 60 or 70 grams of carbs probably through the course of the day. Now, some of it was like rice, like small amount, this would be a meal for me. I would eat like 10 ounces of lean, you know, hamburger meat. I would have like literally 2 tablespoons of rice, and I would have like cashew nuts mixed into like a pure green salad with like nothing else on it, and maybe a splash of vinegar on there, and I would kind of mix it all together, maybe with a little mustard, and I mix it all together, and I eat that. So literally I was probably getting like 10 grams of starchy carbs. Now, you do that with a normal, like a regular person that I'm dieting, or a girl, they're not going to ketosis, you know. They may even store those carbs because most people are very carb sensitive. But my metabolism was so fast that it was not even a smidgen of energy for my brain. So my brain just stayed in ketosis, and I know it. I always tell people are like, how do I know I'm in ketosis? I'm like, oh, you'll know because you feel really good. You have energy, you have focus, you don't have lows, you don't get tired, you don't get moody. When you're not in ketosis or you're right on that borderline, you feel crappy. You know, you can still push through it, obviously, if you're dieting for show. We've all done the low carb diets before, you know, it is what it is, you deal with it. But you know when something flips in your brain and the brain has now got a fuel source available to it that it didn't have before, that means you're in ketosis.
Interesting. Now with that, just as a follow-up question, as you were talking about it, you've trained obviously hundreds and hundreds of people, both males and females. Yeah. Who are the people with the fastest metabolisms other than yourself that you've ever probably listed? Who comes to mind as the 2 best, craziest metabolisms?
Juan has to be up there probably, you know, he was very fast. I mean, he might have been faster than me. I think his metabolism, believe it or not. I don't know if I don't know if I just had genetics to get freaky harder than he did, but you know, because I had a different type of physique. He obviously has a nicer structure than I do. And I would take his physique over mine any day, but I got a little hard. But he has a very, very fast metabolism. Liberatore had a fast metabolism, but I don't know. He's the kind of guy that would miss meals and stuff like that. So I don't, I never really knew if he was actually eating the right amount of food. Your metabolism was really good too, but you also have the fat Italian genetics also. If you eat the wrong foods. I would say, surprisingly, Tony Freeman had a slow metabolism, which you would think he wouldn't because he had that very athletic-looking physique. I'm trying to think about who. You know what? Triple H has a very good fast metabolism too.
Really?
Yeah, really? He's really good. Yeah, he doesn't get fat really. To get him lean, I have to make him suffer a little bit, but he's got a pretty good metabolism. For a guy who's not a bodybuilder.
Yeah,
I would say probably Juan is the most gifted metabolically speaking. I don't think there's anyone faster that I've worked with, unless I'm just forgetting. There's so many people over the years I might be forgetting, but I think that Juan would be number one.
Yeah, for a top tier bodybuilder, he had to. Yeah, because he literally was eating, like you always talk about McDonald's. That guy could eat McDonald's a week out, 7 days out, 5 days out.
There's a great video. I got to put it. I was going to put it up, but it's got music. I used to edit videos with putting like popular music in it because there was no monetizing on YouTube. I'll just put it up on the YouTube channel anyway. We went to McDonald's and I ordered everything on the menu. We ordered everything, and we taste tested everything. And Juan, of course, used anything food related. Juan would come to. So Juan, myself, and I forget who else was there. I think Jeff, the producer, the kid who was working for me at the time, and we tasted everything on the menu. And when we were done, Juan continued to eat. So that just goes to tell you his metabolism. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he could eat. He could definitely eat. Here's one for you. To go in one more supplement-related question. I'm going to ask you, what's the shittiest supplement you've ever taken? And I'm going to tell you mine. Back in the 90s when I first started with creatine, the first creatine I ever purchased was a liquid creatine. Not like your Crayolyzed.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
It came proper, and I'd put like 6 drops under my tongue.
Yeah.
So 5 grams. It was a dog shit product. So one of many dog shit products I've taken. So have you ever purchased or invested at one point in your bodybuilding career in a dog shit product?
Yeah.
And if so, what?
Plenty of them. The liquid creatine was interesting because what their whole selling point to that was that it was the creatine that didn't get you bloated. Well, it didn't get you bloated because you didn't absorb any of the creatine in there. It was like a half a gram or something like that per drop. And what people don't realize is with creatine, it's all dose related. You got to take at least, you need to absorb 3 grams of the stuff. So most times, if you're using a monohydrate powder, and we use the powder creolise that we sell nowadays is ultra micronized. So it's about as solubilized as you can get when you mix it with water. And you need 5 grams to get 3 grams, basically. Most of the companies that you need probably 7 grams to get 3 grams. It's only 50% efficiency. When I sold years ago that liquid creatine product, it was in a big bottle. It was legitimately 3 grams of solubilized, 100% solubilized creatine, and you absorbed 100% of it. It was just a really expensive product to make, and I couldn't make enough money on it. It's like there's been products that I've wanted to come out with, or that I have come out with, that just turned out to be just not profitable. So unfortunately, I can't, as much as I want to sell the best product possible, sometimes you just can't because it's not profitable. I talked about years ago, I came out with a product, I had a product called Ketolize. It was a protein whey isolate that had macadamia nuts spray dried onto it. It was delicious, and it was a protein fat shake, and it would have killed it out there, but it was so expensive, the process to make it, I would have made nothing on it. I wouldn't have been able to sell it. I would have had to sell it too much. People would have complained about the price, and then and that would have been the end of it. So sometimes you can't come out with what you want. I've bought, though, products that were completely bullshit. There was a company called, remember Strength Systems USA?
No, but I'll probably remember the product or the logo.
They used to sponsor all the NPC national shows, but they had a line of all knockoff products. They had a clenbuterol It was they renamed all their products to get after like drugs, and there was nothing in any of these products. They were like complete waste of money. And I knew a guy who worked at a GNC in White Plains. I had met this guy, and he was trying to sell that. They were selling it in GNC, and I'm like, is this stuff any good? He's like, Dave, this is dog crap. And that actually became the guy I bought my first steroid cycle from, believe it or not. He actually had this was back in like 92 or something like that. And you got to remember, the Steroid Control Act came out in 1990, and so there was nothing to be found. This guy had a legitimate prescription for steroids in Jersey, because Jersey didn't have it wasn't a triplicate script, so you could actually just take a regular prescription and go into the pharmacy and get it at the time. So, but the guy didn't have a car. He was kind of like he looked like a rock star. So he had good charisma, the guy, but he basically he was like a loser, basically. So he had no car. He's like, if you drive me to Jersey, to the pharmacy, I'll fill the script and I'll sell you, half of it or whatever. So I was so desperate I wanted to do a cycle. I was ready at the time. And I was so worried about getting fake gear. This guy if I'm going to drive the guy to the pharmacy, right? I figured, that's about a sure thing. And of course I completely overpaid, and the guy was a pain in the ass, and I had to drive him like 2 hours each way. But that was my first steroid cycle. But he told me the strength system stuff was garbage, and it was. I don't know how, and that obviously they went out of business because people realized that they were a sham. I think that Bill Phillips was the person who completely exposed them in Muscle Media. He had that magazine. Remember, he would test products and put the test results. He would actually put how many grams of they claimed it's in there and how many grams is in there. And this company had like nothing. There was like, they claimed like 50 grams of protein. There was like 5, that kind of thing,
Good to know. No, that's interesting. Just as a follow-up question on it, it wasn't planned. When I did my first, just so people understand, the people that are newer to cycles or stacks, or maybe they have these things, they want to know what other people were like when they first started. Yeah. I was 21 when I did my first cycle. I'm 5'8" for people that don't know. And I weighed about 209 pounds, and I wasn't naturally strong, I think, but I could already bench over 300 pounds. So I was a pretty big kid. I had 19-inch arms and things. So how about you, as far as how much did you weigh? And obviously you were lean. How much did you weigh before your first cycle?
I also was not strong naturally. I didn't have anywhere near a 300-pound bench. I was probably getting 185, cheating 225 up. But I built a good base naturally. I started out, as a runner at 140 pounds, which was starved down. So really my real weight was probably about 155, So I went from 155 in about a year up to like 190 or something like that, 185. And just from eating more food, because I was starving as a runner and just training and trying to, I was still overtraining to death, It was ridiculous, But I built myself over the course of, I'd say 88, 89, 90. Over 4 years, I went up to a legitimate about 215 pounds, I'd say. And now I was 5'10" and a half, so at that time. And I couldn't gain any more weight. Now, the last 10 pounds is questionable about how I gained it, because I was using a product known as Hot Stuff. I don't know if you remember Hot Stuff back in the day. Hot Stuff purportedly, rumor has it, urban legend, that they were putting methyl testosterone in the formulation. I don't know if that was true or not. I do know that they switched the formula at some point and completely changed it, and it wasn't the same after that. So maybe I potentially could have been using some steroids and didn't know it, the last 10 pounds. But I did hit a sticking point, and I got frustrated because I was a neurotic about eating and training and, all that stuff. So when I couldn't gain anymore, it became a little frustrating for me. So that's when I started, really researching and reading the Bill Phillips Anabolic Reference Guide and trying to research what my first steroid cycle would be. I probably went over 600,000, variations in my head about what I can do, and I had notes, and it was so neurotic that I actually knew so much about steroids prior to ever taking my first shot. But that's the way to do it. So I was a very informed user. So here I am. I'm doing my first cycle, and I'm answering questions for guys in the gym who've been taking steroids for 10 years. They don't know anything. I know 1,000 times more than they do. I took my first shot yesterday. That's the way it was. So
I wasn't quite that neurotic, but I was pretty close because I decided when I was 20 I was going to do it.
Yeah.
And but at the time I purchased, you probably remember it, the guy was in England. I bought the Steroid Bible from Mick Hart.
Oh, yeah. He was a nut, that guy, but he was entertaining, though, yeah.
Yeah, so that was what I did. I researched all that for like a year.
Right.
And at the time you had started, I think you were already doing or close to doing the MD column. Okay. And obviously that was helpful because you were doing stuff every month and you were breaking down cycles. So I was watching that reading that for years. So that was super helpful.
Yeah, you know, we take for granted a lot of times, and that's why when I try to do videos on YouTube and stuff like that, I try to like pretend that the audience doesn't know anything, because a lot of people are tuning in for the first time and they don't know anything. And if you start talking as from a standpoint that, you know, the audience is completely educated and knows everything you're talking about, then you lose a lot of them. And the reason I really that message was driven home really strongly when I got into snake breeding. And I started watching some of this, you know, the YouTube videos on snakes, and I didn't know what these guys were talking about. They were talking about certain genes, and they were talking about different mutations, and I'm like, what the fuck does this mean, you know? And I even reached out to a couple of them. I said, you know, nothing for nothing. I said, I'm kind of like a teacher in the bodybuilding world. I said, when you do your videos, you should don't assume that anyone knows anything. I said, because a lot of the people that are coming in for the first time don't know anything. So I always try to over-explain things a little bit in the beginning, even if it bores some people, because you have a completely crazy variation of people from knowing a lot to knowing nothing, you know. And that's the same thing when I teach my guru course. I have a guru course coming up this week, and I'm teaching it online, first time. You know, I have to assume that whoever's taking the course knows nothing. So when I start from scratch and build up, and obviously the people who know might be a little bored in the beginning, but it kind of reiterates it in their head and kind of reteaches it to them. And then when we get to a point of more advancement, those people obviously that know it already are going to be at a much greater advantage. But at least the people who started out and didn't know anything now have the building blocks to understand where we're at.
No, it makes total sense.